On a May afternoon in 2021, a single crack shut down the Hernando de Soto Bridge, costing $23 million a day and rerouting the lifeblood of American commerce overnight. Yet this isn't some rare disaster. It's a symptom of a nation always one step behind. Despite being the world's largest economy, U.S. infrastructure earns barely a C grade, and every household pays an invisible tax of $3,400 a year because of crumbling roads, failing water mains, and years of neglect. How did the country that built the Hoover Dam now face a $1.44 trillion repair bill? And why does it keep falling further behind? The crisis runs deeper than potholes. The answer begins where America's infrastructure starts to crack. May 11, 2021. A bridge inspector spots a 24-inch crack slicing through a steel tie girder on the Hernando de Soto Bridge. This isn't a hairline fracture, it's a complete break in one of the bridge's main supports, a fault that could have sent thousands of cars and trucks tumbling into the Mississippi River. Within hours, authorities shut down the crossing. Overnight, 25,000 vehicles, half of them trucks, lose their main route between Tennessee and Arkansas. Every day, the bridge stays closed. The economy bleeds another $23 million. Freight companies scramble to reroute shipments, adding as much as 60 miles to a single trip. Detours clog the I-55 bridge, pushing costs higher for truckers and shippers. The crack didn't appear overnight. Inspection records show warning signs missed as far back as 2016. The inspector responsible is fired, but the damage is done. A single missed flaw brings a vital artery to a standstill, exposing just how thin the margin of safety has become. In the depths of the Great Depression, America's answer was to build. The Golden Gate Bridge rose above San Francisco Bay in just 4 years, from 1933 to 1937, defying earthquakes, tides, and the sharp winds that battered its towers. At the same time, crews in Nevada worked around the clock to tame the Colorado River. The Hoover Dam, poured in massive concrete blocks between 1931 and 1936, stood as the tallest dam in the world and a symbol of what coordinated effort could achieve. These projects were not just feats of engineering, but of organization. Federal planners, local governments, and private contractors worked in sync, driven by a sense of shared urgency. The result? Bridges and dams that became icons, completed ahead of schedule and under budget by today's standards. The country's greatest infrastructure was once built at a pace and scale that now seems almost impossible. That was the American standard: fast, ambitious, and relentless. The American Society of Civil Engineers gave the nation's infrastructure a C grade in 2025. That's the highest mark in decades, but it's still just average, barely passing. Behind that grade is a warning. The country faces a $1.44 trillion funding gap through 2025. Every year, that shortfall grows, and the effects ripple through daily life. The ASCE estimates that the average American household loses up to $3,400 a year to the hidden costs of bad infrastructure: lost time in traffic, water main breaks, unreliable power, and higher prices for goods. These aren't abstract numbers. They show up as potholes that crack wheels, pipes that leak billions of gallons of treated water every day, and trains that crawl instead of run. The US spends less on infrastructure as a share of its economy than most of its peers, and it shows. Even as Congress passes new funding bills, the backlog only shrinks by inches. The bill for decades of neglect keeps coming due. Boston's Central Artery project began with a promise: bury the city's tangled highway, reconnect neighborhoods, and fix legendary gridlock. The plan was bold, but the numbers were fiction. In 1985, officials told the public it would cost $2.6 billion. Internal memos from MassDOT and Bechtel warned early on. Soils were unstable, utility maps were incomplete, inflation was underestimated. Those warnings never made it into the press releases. Instead, every official update painted a picture of steady progress and manageable costs. But as the years dragged on, the truth surfaced. By the time the final tunnel opened, the Big Dig had swallowed more than $15 billion, over 5 times the original estimate. Bent Fleabjerg's research found this wasn't an outlier, but the rule. American mega projects run an average of 62% over budget. Strategic misrepresentation, lowballing costs to win approval, became standard practice. The result wasn't just sticker shock, It was a slow bleed of public trust and resources, draining funds that could have fixed roads and bridges across the country. The Gateway Tunnel, a lifeline beneath the Hudson River, has spent more time tangled in paperwork than in actual construction. Since 2016, project sponsors have been chasing over 60 separate permits and reviews, each one a new hurdle. Approvals are needed from agencies with overlapping authority, from the Army Corps of Engineers to state environmental boards and local zoning offices. Even a single missing signature can stall progress for months. The environmental review alone stretched more than 800 days, despite intense political pressure to move quickly. This wasn't just a matter of environmental caution, it was a maze of duplicate forms, conflicting requirements, and agency turf wars. Regulators at the Port Authority found themselves coordinating meetings with 36 agencies, each with its own timeline and priorities. The result? Years tick by while the tunnel remains a drawing on paper. By the time the last permit clears, costs have climbed, and the urgency that sparked the project has faded. This is how red tape becomes concrete delay. 43% of America's public roads are now rated in poor or mediocre condition. That's nearly half the network that millions depend on every day. Cracked asphalt, potholes, and faded markings, turning commutes into obstacle courses. The same roads designed for last century's cars now buckle under the weight of freight and storms. They were never built to handle. Water systems fare no better. 6 billion gallons of treated water vanish every day through leaking pipes, enough to supply New York City twice over. In 2024 alone, 27 extreme weather events racked up $182 billion in damages, overwhelming drainage, flooding highways, and snapping power lines. Each disaster triggers another round of emergency repairs, pulling money away from upgrades and locking cities into a cycle of patchwork fixes. The more the system ages, the more it costs to keep the basics running. Infrastructure built for a different era now strains against the realities of a harsher climate and heavier use, with no margin left for tomorrow's needs. Japan's Shinkansen started running in 1964. Today, its high-speed trains are so reliable that average delays are measured in seconds, not minutes. In China, engineers have built over 40,000 kilometers of high-speed rail in less than 2 decades, 2/3 of the world's total network. Trains reach speeds of 217 miles per hour, connecting cities that are thousands of miles apart. Europe has spent decades weaving together cross-border rail, power, and broadband, so travelers move seamlessly from Paris to Berlin or Milan without switching systems. Singapore plans for growth before the crunch hits, matching new housing with new subway lines and water systems years ahead of demand. These countries don't just build fast, they build for the future, making infrastructure a living part of national strategy. The result is a level of reliability and convenience that Americans can only imagine. Permitting reform isn't just a buzzword, it's a set of real tools that can break the logjam. Under the One Federal Decision policy, agencies coordinate reviews on a single timeline, cutting average permitting time by about 30% for major projects. Instead of a relay race of paperwork, federal, state, and local agencies now work in parallel, not in sequence. That means less waiting, fewer bottlenecks, and projects that move from drawing board to construction years faster. Another shift is focusing on lifecycle costs, not just the cheapest upfront bid. When contracts reward long-term reliability, builders have a reason to use better materials and smarter designs. Stable funding is the final piece. Dedicated trust funds, like those used for highways and airports, offer steady investment that doesn't evaporate with every election cycle. Bipartisan reformers in Congress and state houses are pushing these ideas forward. The result? A playbook for rebuilding that prioritizes speed, resilience, and value, not just ribbon cuttings. In 2005, the American Society of Civil Engineers gave U.S. infrastructure a C grade, the highest in decades, but still far below standards set by global peers. The evidence is clear. 43% of public roads remain in poor or mediocre condition, and households lose around $3,400 a year to infrastructure failures. Despite bipartisan calls for reform, political gridlock and short-term funding have kept the nation in a cycle of deferred maintenance and rising costs. Cases like the Big Dig's 62% cost overrun and the decade-long permitting delays for the Gateway Tunnel highlight systemic barriers that remain unresolved. While pilot programs have cut federal review times by 30%, questions about long-term investment and coordination across agencies persist. As China and Europe continue to expand and modernize at record speeds, the US faces a documented choice: treat infrastructure as the foundation for prosperity, or accept falling further behind. The facts are in the public record. The outcome depends on the decisions made next.